All right, it looks like I'm logged in. See if you can now log in. Oh, Nancy Hayes has entered. I see Nancy Hayes, Elise Terhune, myself.
Oh, see, they have my, what is it? For some reason, it came up as 8 o'clock. Hold on, maybe that's the problem.
No,
Oh, no, there I am. Okay. Okay, now it says join with video, join without, so I'm on. Okay, so I'm with. Okay, that's on. All right.
For ZBA. And I'd like, Elise, if you would kind of go through kind of a brief description of where we are and where we are at this point in time.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the board met back on June 3rd. Of course, the only application then as now was the King Buchan matter. Now, if you remember, I briefly discussed the history of the property, and I made note of the record that had been established by the prior deliberations of this board. We also acknowledged that the application was on remand from Judge Onifree for a decision on the narrow question of whether an expansion of residential use from seasonal to year-round is actually a change of use or perhaps an enlargement or conversion under the law. Now, this is a question of law, and it calls for this board to interpret the Village of Tuxedo Park zoning law. And if you find that, in fact, using this property for residential uses full-time is either a change of use, an enlargement, or a conversion, then of course you would uphold the building inspector's determination. On the other hand, if you find that it is not, then you would reverse the building inspector's determination. So I also brought at that time two other questions of law to the attention of the board. One being that, well, they're both, it's two sides of the same coin. So in the Village of Tuxedo Park, the Board of Architectural Review really functions as the planning board for site plan review. And in their approval of 2010 to renovate the building, they included a condition of seasonal use only. Also, the Board of Trustees, when it approved the building permit, the issuance of the building permit, it also imposed a condition of seasonal use. So then that, your deliberations have to consider how far you might be able to go in reviewing the building inspector's determination. So after some discussion of this by the board and myself, because these are somewhat, I guess you could arguably say they're somewhat maybe tricky questions of law given the history of the property and the building, etc. An executive session was requested. We did go into an executive session, and I discussed these questions of law with the board, and I gave them my legal advice at that point in time. We came out of executive session and we did not take action. So we are back tonight to consider this question and hopefully come to a resolution of what the board wishes to do.
Okay, I guess I would open it up to discussion and obviously the ability for anyone on the board to ask you any legal questions in regard to the topics that we're discussing.
Sure.
Anyone want to jump in at this point?
Well, this is Gary. Couple points. I guess I should make, my recollection going back many years, when I was on the board, this matter had been discussed on the original questions that came up on the ability to occupy this property. As we know factually, there was no certificate of occupancy. It was not necessarily in compliance with the village provisions. And at the time, both the bar and the Board of Trustees, having kind of an unfortunate situation where the individuals had purchased the property, either knowing or unknowing of the circumstances and the long history that this was a seasonal property historically, had concluded, based also in large part upon the owner's representations to the boards, that their intended use and desire was solely a seasonal use. Accordingly, the board, as we know, ultimately issued with the building inspector a seasonal certificate of occupancy. So in effect, I would say that in large part, this was an accommodation to what was a otherwise bad situation from the owner's perspective. I guess you could say there may have been even a potential illegal transfer of the property ultimately, but the transaction had taken place, and the board was not really in a mindset of reversing anything at that point. I think with regard to the legal arguments, in reflection of the discussion and the advice from counsel and looking at the case law, I would conclude in my mind that there has not been a change of use or conversion, and therefore I guess that in my mind, the conclusion would be that we would have to reverse the building inspector's original determination.
Can I just jump in, Gary? When you say the board, are you talking about your time on the Board of
Trustees? Right.
Okay, thank you.
I think, however, you know, I mean, and one of the discussions that we've had, and kind of let me jump in here, is, you know, we are very uncomfortable, at least I am very uncomfortable, to override the conditions that have been set by the zoning board. I mean, that have been set by the architecture review board, and also that have been set by the Board of Trustees. And obviously it's with good reason, in that, you know, the property is a substandard lot. It has no road frontage. In the wintertime, it would be very impractical to use it. It obviously has safety concerns. And although I think we really can't, we have to overturn John, I don't think we are in the position to authorize year-round use. That is just not, you know, that is just not in our description of in this case.
Yes.
Nancy?
I think Elise clarified that very well in her,
My memorandum?
pardon? In your
Memorandum.
memorandum, clarified all the reasons why we can't, the zoning board, can't go against the Board of Architectural Review or the Board of Trustees. And I think that was quite clear, and you cited cases,
Mhm.
and that's very important.
Yeah, I think what I did when I was asked to opine on the legal aspects here was first, the board is really here to answer a very narrow question. And the question on remand was whether it's a change of use. And, you know, I gave you my opinion of whether it was or it wasn't for the board to consider. These two ancillary questions, though, whether you have the jurisdiction to actually waive or overturn a condition that was set by another board, you know, in my opinion, as a legal matter, you cannot do that. And you're not really being asked to do that. Your focus is narrow. The appeal was whether it's a change of use. I think the board can make that decision. And really, I would not advise you to go any further than that. Even though you can, under your jurisdiction as a zoning board, modify, you can reverse, you can uphold, you can reverse, you can modify, you can step in the shoes of the building inspector at the time that he made the decision. But at the time he made the decision, there were three things. One was that he had legal opinions that it was a change of use, which he relied on, reasonably so, given the history of the property. He also had these conditions that had been placed on the use by the legislative body of the village and its planning arm. So I think we can all understand what the basis for the determination was at the time.
Elise, I'd just like to jump in for a minute. I think you've made clear, although quite different from what we learned before, your legal opinions. But I think certainly in this community and environment today, we understand that decisions, although we must abide by the legal ones, that there are very strong community decisions. And sometimes it's important to support community decisions. So I would like to bring that up, and I would like to say that I found it very useful that many of the community important decisions were brought up the last time around, and they are in front of all the board members. So while you tend to view this as a very narrow decision, you yourself just said how different that was from the legal opinion we received earlier. So I think it's very important that each director independently makes a decision based on what you said, what we've read in the past, and the community we live in.
Good.
Anyone else have anything to say at this point? Now, Elise, if we're going to bring up, obviously we're in the position then to vote, all right? So we are, I guess, going to vote on, certainly the first issue would be whether it's the seasonal use changing to a year-round use, and whether we're going to overturn the building inspector or not. That is the first aspect. And then the second aspect is basically, however, we are not going to authorize the change to year-round use because we feel that that is a decision for the other boards and not our board.
That is certainly a track that this board can take. So you can certainly make the decision and narrow that decision to, is it a change of use? and also at the same time decide not to order the building inspector to issue a year-round unrestricted certificate of occupancy based on the fact that, as I've advised you that I do not believe you have the authority to do that.
Sorry, can you repeat that again? You don't believe
I have advised
we don't believe that you have the authority to do what?
to order the building inspector to issue a year-round certificate of occupancy, because that would be in effect waiving the conditions that were placed on the property owners by the BAR and the Board of Trustees. Now, that doesn't, let's say, close the door, because there are options open for the property owners to reach back to, for example, the Board of Architectural Review to lift that condition for an amended site plan, is essentially what it would be, an amended site plan approval. So perhaps, Mr. Chairman, you could poll the board if they're ready to vote and see how they would like to vote, and then take a formal action.
You know, as you know, and obviously we've all spent a lot of time with this, but I feel that I would like to overturn the building inspector. It is not a change of use. However, it is not, we have not the authority to make it a year-round use and remand it back to the other boards for decisions. Gary?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would vote to overturn the building inspector's decision. I believe that on the basis of the history of this, as well as even to Mary's point about the community, I think it's better suited for the bar and the Board of Trustees to address this, as well as the building inspector, and something that is not necessarily within our parameters at this point to make a decision on.
We usually read aloud the 5 things that we base our decision on. Are you going to do that?
They really don't apply here. Elise, you want to touch on that? Because I discussed this with Elise before.
Yeah, this is
Oh,
not.
I must have missed that.
Yeah, this is not a variance application, it's an application for an interpretation of the law. So they aren't really applicable in this instance.
Yeah. This is not a variance.
No, they
Correct.
didn't apply for variances of any kind. So it looks like you have 2 members who have expressed their opinion.
Well, I can jump in here as well. You know, we, as previously stated, we looked at this many different ways, not only from the property owner's point of view, but the neighbors and what has transpired in the past. And it did boil down, as we discussed, in my view, to that one issue, Elise, that you brought up, which is this really a change in use or not? And I would have to agree that this is not a change, was not a change in use. So we would need to overturn the building inspector's decision.
Would you also, and what is your thoughts? What are your thoughts on ordering the building inspector to issue a year-round certificate of occupancy?
Well, it's my understanding that we don't have the authority to do that, and would not be appropriate for us to do that.
I think that it is not appropriate for you to do. Normally, you would have that authority to step into his shoes, but here, you're looking at 2 other approvals that put that condition on it.
Okay.
I agree.
So,
I think the way that you framed this, Elise, and the way that we've discussed this over time, we have no choice but to overturn the building inspector. But I would like to go on record as saying that I think this is a very narrow view of this, and I think it's very important to pass on comments of the importance of community, the importance of safety, and some of the other issues that we have not, that we've discussed fully. I believe we've discussed all of these fully. But I think it's very important to make some of our feelings known to the other boards on the record as they review this decision.
So I guess what Mary, when you write basically the decision, we need to address those items in the decision.
Yeah, I think that would be very important, Jake.
Yeah,
Because
I would
did a
agree
lot
with
of
Mary.
work.
Right.
okay. So, Mr. Chairman, would you call for a vote then, I guess?
I guess the vote we would be calling for would be to overturn the building inspector. However, we will not issue a year-round residence.
So you'll need a motion on that? Someone will make that motion?
So move.
Okay, Nancy? You'll need a second?
Second,
Second.
Okay. You want to do a roll call vote?
I agree. Yes.
So Jake Lindsay, aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Gary?
aye.
So then I will draft an opinion and I will have that to you within the next couple of days. And it will be, circulated. And once, you will have to determine, and it will reflect all the things that we discussed, as well as Mary, your concerns. That will also be in that decision. I'll circulate it. Once it's approved, that in fact reflects your deliberations, then Jake will be able to sign it and it'll be filed with the village clerk. Okay. Does Joseph have anything to say? I guess he's the.
I thank you for your time. I understand that this is a difficult issue from everybody's perspective, and I know I appreciate the attention and the time that you spent on it.
Thank you. And before we close the meeting, just remember we have another one next Wednesday. And if anyone wants to maybe do a walkthrough over the weekend, give me a call, just one or two of you, and we could do a quick walkthrough. Gary, if you come up, Gary, you're going to be quarantined.
Right.
All right. You're going to be quarantined 14 days.
Yeah.
Oh, what?
I'm in tomorrow.
Jake, this is Mary. I'm very, very familiar with that property. I've walked it many times and of course drive by it every day. So I feel very comfortable in my knowledge of that property.
Okay, good.
If anybody would like a full set of the plans, you could stop by the office, or if you want, I can drop them off.
Yeah, because you do. I'm able to blow up a set because I have a plotter in my office, but you really do need to see a full-size print.
They're huge.
Yes, you need to see a full-size print.
So
Yeah.
one thing I couldn't figure out, and maybe it's on there, but what's the
I'm
square
gonna
footage?
go, guys. I don't want to interrupt.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay.
Bye.
I'm at,
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question? When was it posted? Does anyone have a record of that when this meeting was posted?
I have a copy of that in the office. I'll give you a copy of it.
Okay.
Dave, you had a question?
Yeah, what's the square footage of this house that's being built?
It's approximately 4,000 square feet on 3 floors, which would include the basement. so approximately 12,000 square feet.
12,000 square feet total.
I think I remember 12,800.
Yeah, I looked big from the plans, but
Yeah.
Yes, it's 3 full floors, 1 floor being below grade, and then opening out to the rear entertainment area.
so I know that you have, as a notice must have been sent out to the neighbors, right? That this is coming up.
Yes.
There's been 3 notices, 1 for the planning board, 1 for the bar, and the applicant was required to send out certified return receipt notices as of last Saturday. So the neighbors have essentially been noticed 3 times.
Would they know how big of a property, how big of a building this is or not? My concern is I spoke to one of the neighbors just to make sure they knew about the meeting, and they really had heard about it, but didn't know anything about it.
No, it's not really a concern generally, the size of the house. It's the setbacks and compliance with the zoning code. So unless somebody asked, or unless somebody really studied the plans, they wouldn't know the size of the house.
Well, correct me if the variance is on the basis of deck space, correct?
Yes, there's 2 variances that are needed. One is the percentage of patio and porch area, which cannot exceed 25% of the first floor finished living area.
Right.
And then the second one is regarding the heights of either walls or gates and fences. They have 2 pillars and gates at the entranceway which exceed 4 feet, and they have a retaining wall which makes up part of the driveway and courtyard area that exceeds 4 feet. But correct, Dave, they would not know the size of the house.
Because it's already going to be a big deck even without a variance. And because it's a big house, they're asking for a bigger deck, essentially, right?
Yes, yeah, it is, I think it's 59% over. I think that was the percentage.
It is. Yes, John,
Right.
it is 59% over.
Yeah,
Okay.
so.
Well, isn't it total 59% where it's supposed to be 25%? It's not 59%
Yep.
over, right?
Correct. It's 59%. The max permitted is 25.
It's more than double.
Double.
Yeah.
More than double.
It's still a large number despite the big house.
Right.
And this house has been in front of the bar so far?
This project went before the planning board at least twice, just for general siting of the house. It went before the BAR twice for architecture and just general layout of the driveway, the courtyard, obviously architectural elements. They did consider the size and scale and scope of the nearby homes. And then once the BAR was generally satisfied, I asked if I should send it to the BZA, and they said yes. So the
Okay.
bar and the planning board has seen the plans that have been before you.
Now,
Good,
have they
thank
had
you.
comments on the size of the patio and the retaining walls? And
They had no specific comments for the BZA. We could get you a copy of maybe some of the minutes from the past planning board and BAR meetings.
that would actually probably be helpful.
Mhm.
Would you
Are
think
there
it'd be
any-
helpful to get the minutes and to see what the discussions are?
I think
Yeah, I
it
think
I
so.
think it would be.
Have there been any letters from neighbors or anything?
I recall one letter from a downhill neighbor that was positive. I recall some comments by one of the closer neighbors that was concerned about the height of the structure from Continental Road.
Mhm.
If there were any other comments, they would be in the minutes that we could provide you.
Okay.
Now, Elise, would this be we would open this meeting to the public, correct?
It's been noticed for public hearing, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So you would go through your deliberations, et cetera, and then you would open it for public comment. You'd open the public hearing. Does this board normally make a decision quickly, or does it generally take you a couple of meetings?
Well, don't let this be the precedent here. But
Depends on the
usually they're 2 meetings
Okay.
typically, right? I would have to say, Gary. And
Yeah, I
Mary,
think it's
you
just,
know,
it's a
you
matter
know,
of what the
usually-
issues are.
it's usually 2 meetings.
Yeah.
You know, we go, we discuss, have a public meeting, then kind of, you know, review, and then kind of make the decision the next meeting. Is pretty,
Okay.
is fairly standard.
And then when you make your decision, is this process was a bit unusual because I actually drafted the decision or a version of the decision because it was so focused on the law. Is that typically how you do it, or how do you typically do it? Do you
No,
take a vote
typically,
and-
I mean, usually there is a little bit of a outline up front that we then make a decision, and then you would write up the decision
Okay,
with points that we would make.
all right.
Yeah, I think also because it's more of a typical variance type situation, we would look at those factors,
Mhm.
Right.
the 5 factors, and then make a decision based on that.
Yeah.
John, what do you know as you know? I mean, obviously, this is something that we will go to precedent of what's been done in the past, and you know, I think the 59% as opposed to 25% is a little over the top. I mean, do we have a, you know, they're all individual, and I understand that, but I don't imagine that we really have approved patios to that extent.
I don't think so, but I don't have a listing, you know, of the variances that were given in the past. But 59%, given the fact that the first floor living area is 4,000 square feet, like I think Dave was alluding to,
Right.
it is a large request. Normally, I will tell people when they seek any variance that reasonable requests are generally, you know, granted. Twice what is permitted from 25 to 59, I think gets a little bit beyond reasonable.
Yeah, I kind of concur, you know, and I don't want to set a bad precedent here with this decision.
Right.
And, you know, quite frankly, someone could have a patio and then have a raised patio, and they could always drop a step down and have a landscape patio, which does not really come under the patio description. So, you know, you can really achieve the same thing.
I think that's something that could be entertained, that not every patio has to be hardscaped. You know,
Right.
it could be a nice lawn or a flat area. It doesn't have to be concrete or brick or along that lines.
Mhm.
Anyone have anything else, or should we close the meeting?
I'm good.
All right.
I'm tired.
Someone, I'd like to make a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? John, thank you
Aye.
very much. And
Thank you,
Desiree, thank you. And
Thank you.
Thank
all
you.
right. I don't know, they could kind of having the Zoom meetings kind of work
Gary, safe travels. Are you coming back
Thank you.
tomorrow?
tomorrow.
Yeah,
right?
tomorrow.
Oh,
Yeah.
safe travels.
How are you getting
Tomorrow
home?
afternoon. We're flying.
Okay.
Really? Are there
Yeah.
a lot of flights, Gary, now from Florida?
There aren't, but we're taking a charter.
Bravo.
Right.
All right.
Well, I don't know, if you take a charter, you probably don't have to quarantine yourself, maybe.
Well, I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, but he's coming from Florida. He has to quarantine himself.
Yeah. All right, good
We've
night,
been
everyone.
quarantined.
Good night.
Okay.
Good
Night.
night.
Good
Thank
night,
you,
everybody.
John.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Elise.